let's start with something that maybe not everyone in the room knows about. Your passion for aviation.
I think everybody knows about my passion.
Yeah?
No? Yeah? No?
Do we?
I think some people, yeah. No, I was one of those little kids with, the airplane toys. My mother told me that I was in the hospital for something, or I can't remember, but I was like maybe 3 years old or 4 years old, and I had an old style, well, it wasn't old then, but a helicopter that you run along the ground and sparks fly out of it, and I'm just running that thing all over the place, and there was a guy in the bed next to me that had a broken leg, and I was running the helicopter up and down his cast, and it was just, so it was a passion from the very beginning. And I was very fortunate that because of Star Trek, and the military loved Star Trek, when they found out that I flew, I got invited to all this crazy stuff. I mean, just a little side thing, my publicist at the time would always call probably once or twice a month and say, Michael, I got a call from the Navy, and they would like you to come and say hello to the troops and sign autographs and da-da-da. And they said, the thing is, they can't pay you, but they can give you a ride in something. And she would say, what's an F-18? So it was fantastic. In fact, I just found it. If you go on YouTube and look at Michael Dorn Thunderbirds, they have a piece from the 90s of me flying with the Thunderbirds.
Super cool.
It was, and I look at that and I'm just like deliriously happy. I mean, it's like, so yeah, I got a big passion for it. I still fly.
Cool. I have one other question before we go ahead and throw it to y'all. Are y'all excited to get some questions in here? Yeah? Okay, great. So I'll just do one quick one then. And I'm sure a lot of people also have this on their minds. So what do you miss most about filming with Star Trek?
Oh, the relationships. I mean, this thing is bugging me. We had a great time. And as time goes on, it's very funny. You miss things when it's just over. Like you kind of miss working every day. Going to the studio is always a great time. Then you miss the sort of like, as you get far away from it, you miss the money because you're not making this crazy money all the time. And then it really settles into you have a chance once you're really far away from it and step back, you have a chance to really figure out what you do miss. And for me, it was the relationships. I mean, those relationships were amazing. And just a reminder for me of how wonderful they were. We were in Vegas this year, and Jonathan Frakes was there, and LeVar Burton, and we were all sitting around talking about something. And Jonathan and I always have lunch whenever we can. We'll go up there and we talk a bunch of treason and hang out and stuff. And I said, look, we got to get together again. He says, oh, yeah, I know. He says, well, look, he and Marina are going to be working on Patrick's show. Why don't you come to the set? I go, great. So I call the set, and I'm sitting there, and LeVar goes, hey, I want to come too. You're coming too. So we figure out a day that next week, and Jonathan and Marina and I and Patrick and LeVar all got together on the set. And it's like nothing had changed. We came and we hugged, hey, how you doing? And Marina was there. I hadn't seen Marina in a while. And they were very nice to us. I was very happy about it. And then after lunch, there was like maybe an hour of downtime. And so all of us are sitting probably 100 yards away from where they're filming in this house. They're filming in the house. And they could hear us laughing and screaming at each other and they said, you guys, I can't believe it. And I said, no. And it was just, and those are the things I think even people that kind of go like Patrick's been, not divorced from it, but he's been away from it for a long time. Even he was kind of going, oh my God, this is what, this is what it was about. So that was my thing that I missed the most.
It was really special. I love that. So are we ready to go ahead and open it up to the audience? Yes? Yeah? Are we ready with some questions? Great. Sarah, go ahead. And
Hey, does
Sarah's
this
going to
work
come
fine?
around to
Yep.
you with a microphone so that we can all hear your question. Waha. Great, right over here.
What was your favorite moment as Worf?
Perhaps too many to choose from.
Yeah. Favorite moment. I don't. It's. That's a difficult question. I'd say there were quite a few. The Fistful of Datas was. I'm a big Western guy from the old days. I mean, I love Westerns like crazy. So that was fun to do that. There were 2 episodes in Deep Space Nine that were great episodes, but I think probably I think they just all kind of run together now. I think the 11 years was my favorite moment. Because you kind of go, well, what about that? Well, that was good, but that was really much better. What about that? Well, that was good, but no, that was it just kind of, which is a good thing. Because if you could pull out just one thing that was good, then you're probably not having a good time. Thank you.
Oh, just a couple right over there. She'll get to you, don't worry.
Thanks for coming,
Yes,
Michael.
thank you.
I really love the character of Worf, and especially what the show Deep Space Nine did with Worf and Jadzia together. And I had read that the writers kind of developed that relationship because of your on-screen chemistry together, and that kind of blossomed out of that. I was hoping you could speak to that a little bit and just how that evolved.
Yes. Interestingly enough, the writers didn't really have that in mind until they saw Terry and I together. Because Terry and I had been, really good friends before Deep Space. And so it was like, oh, hey, Terry, how you doing? And interestingly enough, when that happens, there's a comfort level that happens between actors when you know them, as friends. And I guess that's what they saw. And I thought I thought they did a really nice job. A really nice job. I mean, they kept really true to Worf, his sort of like kind of goofy, what are you doing, I'm kissing you. Oh, okay. And it really opened up Terry's character, gave her another avenue, and Terry did such a great job with that because she had to play, like she was one of the very few, I guess in maybe his first love, but who really could match him, pound for pound, as they say. I mean, she was just as bold and as warrior-like as he was, and very, very forward, and she loved to tease him. It was like her favorite thing. She would just tease him, and he'd go, I don't believe that. That's not. He goes, I'm kidding. Oh. So yeah, I was very happy with that, and I was very disappointed that they didn't come to agreement for her to do the last year. That to me was like, although Nicole was fabulous, it just kind of put brakes on everything, and you had to make a left turn. So that was too bad. You're welcome.
Great question. Who's next? We've got one right on your left. Right over there.
Mr. Dorn, good afternoon.
How you doing?
Doing pretty good. So I have a question. So during the original series, the Klingons were pretty one-dimensional characters. It wasn't really until Next Generation till we really delved into like the culture of the Klingon people and what they're really about and kind of Sins of the Father. That episode kind of jumped it off. So I was just wondering that since you pretty much had uncharted territory, could you share any insights on what the contributions of how the basically the Klingon culture kind of developed through the character of Worf.
That was a great question. I would like to say that I had everything to do with it, but that would be a lie. I created the character Worf. Basically, that's what I did. I gave him not a backstory, but I gave him, how he felt about everything. I felt I don't like this, and they picked up on that, the writers and producers. I think that they were just probably mildly shocked how easy it was to write for these guys, because they're very Shakespearean. They are, they have their ups and downs like everybody else. But they were the writers were the ones that really opened that part of him up. I don't know where they got all this stuff from, but I think in writing the backstory, of Worf's family and all that type of stuff, they just discovered this whole wealth of things they could do. And also, I got to say that they hired some of the most fabulous actors to play the Klingons. I mean, these guys, first rule of Klingon acting, you got to be big. Not size, you got to, everything is, sir, and I will fight until the death and God, And they hired some really fabulous actors. And there were some just incredible moments. And I don't think I think they were shocked at not only what they could come up with, but the response. And also Worf isn't a guy that leads everything around. He's not, he basically is sitting watching, and he's a man of few words. And so that allowed them to write all this fabulous dialogue for the other actors. And they'd go, God, we will just die. What do you think, Worf? No. Or, yes. And so, and I think they were, and in fact, they were actually the first season. There was an episode called Justice where I'm hugging this blonde woman, and she's really cute, and I go, nice planet. And they said in editing, when they were looking at the dailies, they ran that back over and over just because it was the funniest thing they've ever. And that began a Worf line every year. Once a year, there was one line that they wrote for Worf. And the funny thing is, in comedy, if you think you're funny, you're not funny. So Worf didn't think he was funny. He'd say, some people would laugh, and he goes, that's not funny. Yes, it is. And so that's how it kind of developed. But they were, I think they were surprised by what they could get from that. And it continued into Deep Space Nine. I mean, holy smoke. I mean, that was just amazing what they did. They did 2 episodes. Somebody asked me earlier about my favorite episodes, and there are 2 that really, I think, a bunch on Next Generation, yes, but the 2 that really defined the Klingon culture and the best sort of writing was Soldiers of the Empire and Once More Into the Breach, where the old Klingon dies. Just brilliant. I mean, you could do a movie on that. So, yeah. This guy had a thing right here, since you're.
You have got such an iconic voice. Of all the Star Trek characters, that's my favorite. So how did you, as an actor, when you're approaching this and they cast you as a Klingon, how did you develop that into what it became?
Another good. You guys have a bunch of great questions. I hope I might run out of good answers, though. How did you do that? I don't know. A great question because when I got the role, I was using this voice, kind of Michael Dorn. I was angry, but it was just this angry Michael Dorn. And about the second or third episode, maybe the third episode, Gene came up to me and said, "Hey, Michael, we got to do something about your voice." And I go, what do you mean? He goes, "Well, it sounds too American." And I go, "Well, thank you very much." He goes, No, that's not a compliment." And so he said, "We just have to come up with something else." And I said, "Okay." And so we agreed that I would go away, and maybe, a couple of days later, I flagged him down, and I said, "Okay, I've come up with 3 voices." And I showed him all the 3, and he goes, "That one." And that was it. And the first was an English, he's really like Shakespeare, Yes, and he spoke with an English accent. No. And then there was I forgot what the third one was, but the second one was the Worf. And it was gravelly and mean and, and just, there's anger in his voice the whole time, even if he says, I'd like a piece of pie, So that's how it came. And the interesting thing about Gene is and you don't hear it much because a lot of times it's kind of lost in the ether about the whole mythology of Next Generation. But Gene knew how to do television. He knew stories. He knew how to work with actors very well, because the first, and I always do this on every job I get. I always ask the producer or the director, whoever's in charge. I say, "Look, what do you want from this character? I know what I did. Do you want that? Do you want, And Gene said, and so I came to him because they gave me no guidance at all about Worf. They just said, "You're Worf, now go act." And I said, "What do you want from this character?" And he said, "Whatever you do, don't listen to what you've heard before. Don't go by what you've seen before, by anybody else's performance. Make it your own." And so I said, "Fantastic." So that's how it came. And like I said, the writers were fantastic. They ran with that Worf thing. I mean, they really did. Thank you.
So I think I'm going to go to this lady that looked like her arm's about to fall off.
Sure, yeah.
Yes.
We don't want arms falling off.
So how am I going to get back here? Excuse me. Yeah, did you pick up your other arms?
Mine's sort of a two-parter. I was wondering if you followed any of the other Star Trek series like Voyager and Enterprise. And if so, how did you pay attention to the way that in an episode you go back in time and you're on Kirk's ship and the Klingons don't look like Klingons. And then in Enterprise, they establish why, because Data's previous character, Sun, did something to their DNA and changed them and everything. Did you like the explanations?
No, the writers, when I was growing up, and first in the business, there were a different set of writers, and I always said that it was all about the story, and it had to make sense in some way, and if you're writing Star Trek, it's a moral play, it's a morality play, so it's not difficult to write a story about some morality. But I never liked the Tribble episode in the original. Never liked it. People love it. I didn't like it. I just thought it was. I just didn't like it.
I think you just broke a lot of hearts.
Oh no, they probably go, "What does he know?" But I thought when they did Deep Space Nine, and I thought that they kind of wimped out on that. that explanation. They could, and then when they came back, oh, their DNA was changed. I mean, it's kind of, either you come up with a really good explanation that goes okay, or don't even breach it. Don't say anything about it. Just let it go. You don't have to. So but that's just my my own personal opinion about that stuff. But they never did, because our makeup was different than the original. It was different than the movies, and they never did really, go into it, and that was fine. I don't think people were going, wait a minute, they're different than the original. What's going on here? I'm not going to watch this. Boom. We're just not like that. So, did that answer your question? Pretty much. Yeah. Did I like that? I didn't like that either. I thought they wimped out. And I was thinking about writers. Writers these days, they write differently. They think of bits, little things, and then they write around that. Let's see, how do we get to that? Or else, in that case, I think they just went, what do we say? And some guy came up with a really smart aleck thing, and they thought, oh, that's great, that'll work, and they stuck that in. I didn't like it. Yes. Who's next?
At another con, I had asked you about your favorite animation voice. How did you get into voice acting?
I was already, not a lot. I had done a couple of commercials before Star Trek. But when you are on a show like Star Trek or any show, and it's a distinctive voice, the producers and directors and clients that do these animated shows, they go, well, God, we need a really kind of big, rough, and surly voice for that. Worf, and they call you. And that's how that starts. And then from there, the producers, everybody, they basically call you when they do another animated series, and there's that type of voice, they need that, then that's when they call you for that. The show that I did the most was I Am Weasel. And they thought that, here's this little bitty weasel, and he should have a voice like, hello, I am Weasel, and they thought it was very funny. And that's why that came along. So but there's a whole section of really incredibly talented voiceover people that do kind of everything. And but it's very difficult to get in there. But occasionally, like I'm doing a show now that I can't talk about. But it's the same thing. They looked at this character and they said, oh my God, what about him? And they go, wow, that's great. It's a very funny story. This one show, I think it was Duck Dodgers. In fact, I remember it so well. That the producers and the writers were going, we really would love to have, Michael Dorn do the Centurion voice, but we don't know. And the producer who knows me said, well, I'll give him a call. And they were like, you can do that? I go, yeah. And she called, hey, Michael, would you like to do this? Sure, okay. And that was it. They were just shocked. They were like, wait, what are you talking about? Don't you have to sacrifice, Thank you. You want to get in the back?
Yeah.
In the back?
Let's head back this way.
Let's get in the back.
Very far back?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure. Run.
I like how you first.
You are in no hurry, are you?
We got plenty of time.
I got plenty of time. Okay, yes.
Worf was one of the few characters to have made it across different versions of Star Trek, DS9 and even Next Generation, I think.
And the original, too.
Okay, 3 then. did you have a hand in getting Worf across all of those different Star Treks, or did the writers just so happen to make that happen?
Did I? What?
Like, did you have any sort of influence in making that happen?
No.
Like,
Oh, man, it was...
or were you just along for the ride?
Well, I wouldn't say I was along for the ride, but I definitely was. Every one of those things was a shock to me. We were in the second or third episode, or second or third year of Next Generation, and the guy who does the set decorator, head secretary, was talking to Nick Meyer, who directed The Final Frontier. Not was it? No, Undiscovered Country. And they're walking through the sets, you know, looking at stuff, you know, for that they could use for, you know, the Undiscovered Country. And I'm standing there, and I don't know Nick, but I knew the set decorator, and he goes, "Oh, hey, Mike, how you doing? Oh, this is Nick Meyer. Yeah, they wrote a part for you in the next movie." I said, "Really?" "Yeah." And they walked away. Okay. And that was, and in Next Generation, we finished the show, 94. We did the movie in 94. It aired at the end of 94, you know, during the Christmas time. And I was done. In fact, I was in 95, I was in Baltimore doing a voiceover for this game, on camera and voiceover, and I get a call from the producer, you know, at my hotel. I don't know how he knew where I was. And he says, "Hey, Michael, would you like to come back to Deep Space Nine as Worf?" And there's two interesting stories about that. They both have punchlines. The first was with Nick Meyer. I'm in full makeup, and he's walking through, and he goes, I say, "Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah." They, "Oh, yeah, wrote a part for you in Undiscovered Country." "Okay, bye." Boom. And then about a couple of weeks later, they say, "Hey, Michael, Nick would like to see you and talk about the part." Okay, so I'm not in makeup, you know, and I go in there, and have my little, you know, Izod shirt on, and I walk in, and he's going, he's walking past, and he's talking to people, and, you know, whatever the case, and he goes in his office, and they said, "Okay, Michael," and I walk in, and I go, "Hi, Nick, Michael," and he goes, "Oh my God, you're black." He said, "I didn't know you were black." And I went, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh." I mean, it was so funny. It was funny, and he didn't mean anything by it, but he was just saying, you know, he was shocked. And the second thing was when I got the call from Rick Berman to come back to Deep Space Nine. I said, you know, well, before I got the call, whenever people would ask me at conventions, I said, "I am done. I am over. I'm through with that. No more makeup. I wouldn't do it in a million years. Forget it. It's not going to happen." "How much?" "Well, I could do that." So yeah, so they were both shocks. It was great. I mean, I had a great time actually in the negotiation for Deep Space, because they were rough, and I had a great lawyer who's one of my dear friends, pilot buddy, and we were just having a ball, you know, negotiating. Because, you know, in negotiations, as a lot of you guys know, if you don't care, you know, if you're willing to walk away, you're in the best position. There is a chance that you could lose it, but there is a greater chance that you'll get what you want. And we were very happy about that. So, yeah.
It's a great life lesson, by the way.
It's a great life lesson, yeah. Got to be willing to walk away. Yes.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi. Does your wife still love me more than you?
She loves you more than me.
Oh, okay.
But I am a Tribbles fan.
You are what?
A Tribbles fan.
Oh.
A Tribbles fan.
Yeah. Anyway, Talk about.
Did you just tell you that? Get going.
I'm in trouble.
Okay.
First of all, thank you. Talk about makeup. How long did it take you to get into makeup?
Initially, it was 3 hours, and it was you had to be ready to shoot or ready to rehearse at 7, so I had to be there at 4, and then I would be the last one to leave, so it would be 10 o'clock or something like that at night. And very interesting when I got this house, and I guess the 3rd season, and I didn't know I needed drapes because the first, I got the house and it was during the shooting, and I would be out before dawn and back home before, after the sun went down. And one day I woke up and I'm going, what is that? Oh my God, what is that? And oh my God, it's the sun. And it was rough. They got it down to about 2.5 hours towards the end of the season. And then on Deep Space, I just really wanted them to make an effort, not to do about the makeup, but just be able to schedule it so that I'm not, in makeup for no reason all day. So, and they did a good job about that. Yep.
I don't know where.
Where did she go?
Where'd Sarah go? Oh, hi. Let's head over that way.
Hi, Michael. Hi. My question is, what were some of the biggest differences and challenges going from being part of the films? What were things that you liked about doing films versus the TV show, and things you didn't like as much?
Interestingly enough, the films are super easy because we do not quite a film, but we do close to a film in 7 days. 7, 8 days. So you're doing 7-8 pages a day, whereas the film they do 1-2 pages a day. So it really is an easy job. And it's very funny when you're doing the TV show. They say, okay, we need to build a room over there, and they go build a room, right? On movies, they go, we need to build a room over there. Hey, Bob, get the set director over here. Okay, we want to build a room over there. Let me get the best boy. Best boy, come over here. And they look at it, and they stare, and they talk, and, it just goes on and on. And so it's a really big difference, really big difference. So, but the only downside of the movie was I couldn't fly during those 75 days. During the TV show, it's okay, because if I crash, they say, Worf is dead, and they move on. But if I crashed in the movies, then they'd have to rewrite a bunch of things, which is really horrible for people to rewrite. And a very funny story, my lawyer did all my contracts, and he's a pilot too, and we've flown so much together, so he knew the first time they did that. He said, okay, Michael, this is what we agreed upon, these are the dates, and blah, 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 and I'm going, great, great, and I'm just getting ready to sign it, and he goes, and you can't fly during those times. I went, wait, what? And he knew that he had to wait until the very end, or else I'd be like, no, forget you, I'm not going to do that. So, cool. Thank you.
We've got time for a few more. Anybody else on this side? Great. All right, let's head
bunch over
all the way
here.
over here. Yep. There we go.
So once you were in the makeup, how tolerable or intolerable was it just in the makeup throughout all the shooting? Was it bearable? Were you
No,
ready
it
to
was-
scratch it off your face?
No, I didn't want to scratch it off my face,
yeah.
but it was a constant nagging. It was just constant, And during the day, they had to re-glue all day. Whenever you getting ready for a shot, they'd come over and they'd have to re-glue. And that glue is like airplane glue. And just figure putting that on your face. just going, it was the worst. It was truly the worst. In fact, they asked me. It was a very famous story that's been out there for a couple of years now. They were contemplating having me coming back on Discovery, and they called and we were talking, and I go. At first, I was kind of excited about it, and then I remembered, and it was sort of like, I don't know, So, but it was rough. That's the worst part. But I did it. I mean, it was. Yes.
Great. We have right down here.
And the fantastic uniform there.
Yeah.
So my question is about.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You got to speak up.
Okay, so let me make sure you can hear me. First, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Two, I just want to ask, is there an episode, a topic in the Star Trek universe that you feel could have been explored more? I don't know, for me as a fan, there's some episodes where I'm like, oh, we could have seen Wesley Crusher go off with the Traveler and see what happened with him. So is there any topic about Worf, and I don't know about the Worf Chronicles, perhaps, that you feel has not yet been explored?
Yeah, I wrote the script, the Worf Chronicles, and it really does explore not so much about Worf. Worf is always in there, but it explores what's happening with the Klingon Empire now. You might say it's the Klingons were always fashioned after the Russians from the very beginning on the original TV show, and with the fall of the wall and all that type of stuff, things have changed a lot, and that's what the focus was. I thought that they dealt with it as much as they could on Deep Space Nine, but that is something that they could go in, and they'd have to have a Worf show to do that. But that's what I would like to. That's what I would have loved to have seen. Just the inner working. So I mean, the Klingon Empire is Shakespearean. I mean, they are, coups and assassinations and takeovers and honor and loyalty and backstabbing and, it just goes on and on, Honor and the one thing that interesting talk about what you learn about the character is that I look back on Worf character, and this is a guy that has no fear. I mean, he literally, if you look at every episode, unless you guys can come up with one, that he has no fear about anything. I mean, except his son, He's really sort of like, I don't understand that at all. But when it comes to being a soldier, this is a guy that just doesn't have any fear. He doesn't exhibit any fear. And I thought that was always really cool. Thank you.
Great. We do still have time for a couple more. We've got some straight in the back there. Run, run, run. It's a little faster. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for doing this. I'm a big aviation nerd too. Have you ever gotten recognized on ATC? Do you ever get to break out the Worf voice and just to make a point?
Well, if you're an aviation guy, those of you are and those of you aren't. If you know that you have your regular voice and you have your aviation voice. It's always you go, okay, are you ready? Is the door closed? Okay, let me call tower. Van Nuys Tower, this is 859 or 567, ready to take the runway for 26 right, And so I had an F-86 a few years ago, and I've been flying, and the show was like at its peak, I think, when I started flying the F-86, and so I took off out of Van Nuys, and I was going somewhere, and you have to go talk to Burbank Approach. And I take off, and they say, okay, 38301, go to Burbank Approach. And I go, and I guess I had the Worf voice for some reason. It just gets lower and lower when you're flying. And I go, Burbank approach. This is 38301 experimental F-86, left turn to 110. And the guy goes, experimental 383, is this Worf? I go, yes, it is. He said, oh, man. And I'm going, could you tell me which way to go now after, because I know he wanted to go, that episode when you, but that was pretty funny. And then I was coming back, I'd flown the F-86 to Florida, and I was coming back, and I stopped in, I'll never forget, Lake Charles, Louisiana. And I'm flying in, and it's not bad weather, but it isn't great weather. And so I'm going on instruments, and it's like you really have to concentrate. So I'm coming in, and I go, Lake Charles, this is November 38301 experimental F-86, en route for one-way 34 ILS. And he goes, is this Worf? And I go, yeah. And this guy did go, oh, man, I love your character so much. My family, we get together, and I'm trying to land. And I go, that's really good, but can you give me clearance now? Oh, I'm sorry, man. Yeah, clear to runway 2. But it was very funny. But yeah, if you're, it doesn't matter if you're Worf or not. If you're a pilot, you have your regular voice and you have your pilot voice.
Although I have a hard time believing that everyone else's aviation voice is that sultry.
Oh, yeah. Oh, believe me. I've seen it where, a guy literally a guy has a high voice. Yeah, Michael, the other day, and he goes, Van Nuys Tower, this is 95495. So.
Yes. Thank you. I was wondering, Nichelle Nichols did break barriers for Star Trek, being a person of color on the screen, that, as Whoopi Goldberg said, wasn't a maid. I was wondering, from your perspective, as you've seen this go through, especially in science fiction, do you think that Star Trek kind of, and you kind of lead the way in that? Because it seems like when it winds up on not Star Trek, but fantasy or anything like that, it seems that that's the way things start to go in movies and TV shows.
I'm not sure what the question is. Do you think Star Trek led the way in terms of?
For people of color, people of disability, any minorities that have been pushed along, do you think they kind of led the way for TV or for representation? Thank you.
Star Trek or
Star Trek specifically, I guess that would be your experience.
Yeah, my experience with that is that there was years ago they used to, when the Beatles came out, and they really started changing, they said, oh, the Beatles led the way, and it really isn't. Star Trek is just reflecting who we are and how we're changing. Is that your question? Yeah. And science fiction for many, many years was relegated to B movies, not to the mainstream for a long time. And so they could deal with stories and take chances. And all of this is just, all of the things that we see on Star Trek is just a reflection of where we are as a culture and where we are. And you really have to. It's nice that some people believe that, and if that's perfectly fine too. But my personal opinion, I think it was just a mirror. The reason that any of this stuff got to be in mainstream is that with Star Wars, not with Star Trek, but with Star Wars, they made a fortune, and so everybody kind of goes, we could make a fortune, off this, and so it became mainstream. They found that people like us go to movies, or watch television, and it's been an explosion. I mean, you just wouldn't believe. I mean, with all the fantasy and everything that's out there right now, it's huge business. But I like to think that we hold up a mirror to our society. The original series did probably a lot more than the later series after ours because Gene Roddenberry created our series, and he still had that edict about it is a people show. It's about who we are and what we're doing. So I've always felt that way. Always felt that way. It was just great television. Great television.
Great. We have time for one more very quick question, and then we're going to have to go ahead and wrap it up.
And
Does
it
anybody
better
have
be
one
a
quick
good one.
There we go.
Hey there. Thank you for joining us, by the way. So I've collected a couple of your autograph cards from a certain trading card company. And I always wondered, how's a deal like that brought to you? And do you like sign them while you're at the breakfast table having coffee? Or how do you sign them?
First of all, I got to tell you that I'm a fairly private person. And it being Worf kind of worked for me because nobody recognized me. In fact, even just recently, this year, I had dinner with Patrick, and people would come up to him, and they would go, "Oh, and go on and on, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Stewart," you know, and they have no idea who I am. And I kind of like that. I always think it's, you know, when you're in this situation, that's why we're here. We get it. But when you're out, you know, having dinner or whatever the case like that, you know, you kind of, you know, especially if you're in a romantic mood or something like that, you know, honey, I've always thought that you. Excuse me, Mr. Dorn, would you sign this? Okay, honey, just a minute. Don't cool off. But I understand. I mean, I have my Sam Waterston, who did Law and Order for umpteen years. I always thought he was just fabulous, and I saw him at the airport, and I had to go up and to him and say something. Didn't have him sign anything, but if you come up and you go, "Hey, I really like your show," or "That was really great, thank you very much," and go away, that's fine, and they feel good too. So yeah, it doesn't, you know. But you can't, I don't think you can come to a Star Trek convention like this and go, you know, I'm not signing anything. They come up to my table with Worf things. That's ridiculous, you know. It doesn't work like that. Thank you.